What's up, everybody? Please like and subscribe, comment, and share on our videos. Grasshopper and the Bear.
Perfect.
Hey, Mr. Brian Schwartz, pleasure to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me.
Welcome. You're welcome. Welcome to the Grasshopper and the Bear podcast. Hey, currently working with one of your old friends, John Valencia at Baker Street Boxing in San Francisco now.
That's my guy.
Yeah, that's right. My guy too now. That's awesome. So you're at your gym, Undisputed Boxing in Redwood City, correct?
Yes, sir.
You started out in Taekwondo, and you are fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo. You have multiple championships in sport karate, world championships in kickboxing, ISKA titles. You've also fought in mixed martial arts, and you built your own gym from the ground up, Undisputed Boxing, and you also do mentoring and assistance to other corporate businesses in the fitness realm, I believe.
Yes.
Glad to have you today, and please tell us how you got started in martial arts.
How did I get started in martial arts? I mean, I feel like you got the laydown of all my stuff. I think like a lot of people back in the day, my dad took me to see a Bruce Lee movie. I was 5 at the time, and I wanted to do martial arts, karate, and he said, if you want to do it, you need to wait a year. Right, wait till you're 6, and if you're 6, if you still want to do it, then I'll sign you up. So 6th birthday rolled around, and here I was like, all right, Pop, I'm ready. Sign me up for some karate lessons. And he took me down to a traditional Shotokan dojo and signed me up, and that's how it all got started.
Well, first of all, how did you like the Shotokan style of karate? And then, and what was your next style? And how did you move on to I believe it was Taekwondo, if I'm not mistaken. How'd you move on? Yeah. How'd you go from Shotokan, and what led you to Taekwondo?
So so my parents looked around for like a school that was not going to be like a commercial school, like a more traditional style school, and we found this traditional Shotokan place that was in Millbrae at the time, and like the instructor, he was super old school, like hardcore, like he used to walk around with a bamboo stick, like smacking kids if you weren't paying attention, or if your stances weren't low. He was legit like that. Studied in Japan. And then we moved. I was living in South City at the time. We moved to Foster City, and the commute was going to be too much back and forth for my folks. So my instructor recommended Mikowski's Taekwondo, which later turned into Golden State Taekwondo, which, although his Taekwondo school they were really more similar to, had Japanese influences in there, like the old school Taekwondo, those martial arts, because they had that Japanese influence. All the forms were very similar to the Shotokan form. So it felt like a good transition. And I really liked the instructor, and from there we went on and started studying that.
Got you. Nice. There's nothing like developing a good foundation in martial arts for young people, right? For kids, because it carries you through for the rest of your life, correct?
For sure. I mean, for me, it was like, it changed my life. I mean, I was when I first started training, 6, that was the worst in the class, like by far the worst, like so bad. Like the instructor told my parents, they were like, maybe you should find a different sport for him, because I don't think this is going to be his thing, right? So, and I was there for a few years before we moved, and then when we moved, and I started training with my instructor, Chris Jensen. He, my old instructor, even said, "Yeah, I don't know if I'd put any effort into that kid. It's kind of a waste." And I was the worst at that school too, and I had already had a few years of experience, but it was the worst. And then, but I liked it. I liked going. My parents supported me, even though I was crappy. They would bring me every day, and I kept going and practicing. And pretty soon, I wasn't the worst anymore. I was like second worst, right? And then, but it instilled that discipline and patience. And my instructors were super no, they were just like caring people, right? So even though maybe looking at me, they weren't seeing like this future champion or anything like that. It was just like, oh, this is someone that's passionate about it. And even though he sucks, we're gonna still put into him every day like they did all the other kids. And it seriously changed my life.
Very nice, very nice. So that's interesting. So how did what was the Taekwondo training like? And I believe it was Foster City. What was that like for you as a kid? And then how did you become from one of the worst or not so talented kids to winning sport karate championships and all that?
Yeah, I think what was, they called it Taekwondo, they called it Taekwondo, but it was really, like I was saying, it was like really like a Korean karate. Like, so what and it was traditionally they would do, the traditional forms, but then they incorporated, the kicks of Taekwondo, but then my instructor's instructor had boxed. So he had, when we sparred, he had us all standing upright with our hands in a like almost like a boxer stance. So we were throwing punches like boxers, kicking like Taekwondo, and then doing the traditional portions of the traditional karate or traditional Taekwondo. So it was almost like a hybrid, like really kind of like what mixed martial arts is, right? Taking the kind of the best from each one and doing, and for as far as like how like I came about, I think it just kind of goes with being consistent and training hard, and like I said, I loved it, right? So even though like there was things I couldn't do, but I would practice them, I would practice and practice, and I failed my black belt test twice. I failed my black belt test twice, and I failed other tests coming up, but it was I guess it would, you would say I was determined, but really, I just really enjoyed the environment that it was in, and it felt like family, that community, and pretty soon I started kind of growing into my body. I was kind of tall and lanky and really skinny kid, right? I started kind of growing in, and it just kind of started clicking, and all of a sudden I was like, oh wait, I'm like starting to win at tournaments. My parents probably took me to 100 tournaments before I even like won a match. It's like, and anyone that's been in like traditional martial arts, that you sit at those things all day long, right? Get out there, you lose your first fight, it's like 2 minutes and it's over. It was a lot of those before we started getting a little taste of what it was like to win a little bit. But I felt like it was probably right before I passed my black belt test. I was about 15. When it started kind of clicking, I started kind of growing into my body a little bit, and started being more competitive with everything we were doing.
It makes sense now that you tell me the curriculum or the style of Korean karate, if you will, that you began in, because it sounds like the way it was kind of a hybrid and not just a Olympic style Taekwondo.
Right.
And that you were able to transition to the other combat sports and be successful. That makes sense to me now.
For sure. And, and back then, like, my instructor was, I thought, really good at a lot of times, what you know, right? You stay in your lane, you practice whatever your discipline is, right? Our instructor was kind of like wanted to learn from other martial arts. So we'd go to tournaments, and back then, you could kick the groin, right? Like there, those were some of the rules that, wasn't really familiar with. So he would bring in like Kaja Kempo specialists or Kempo specialists, guys that were a little bit better at that to help teach us, so that when we would go against other styles at these tournaments, we knew what we were doing. So it was like he introduced us to a bunch of different martial arts to kind of make our own style, and that eventually translated into kickboxing and full contact fighting.
So it sounds like you had a really really smart coach. I mean, that's what they do. They whatever you need or the athlete needs, if a coach doesn't know it, he'll expose his athlete to it, so they become more well-rounded. So that's really good on your
for sure. No, I felt super fortunate. And sometimes you don't get that with like the traditional martial arts guys, right? Because it's like you learn what you're learning with that style, right? So but I felt like he was ahead of the times and had a lot of great fighters come out of the school that we trained at in Little Foster City, which isn't, it's not like this huge metropolitan area, right? It's a little teeny suburb town on the peninsula.
Well, you became quite a name in kickboxing after that with the K1 promotion and Strikeforce promotion. And those were two of the biggest fighting promotions at the time. This is before MMA was mainstream and before they even had MMA at Strikeforce.
Yes.
So what made you want to be, for me, there's a difference between practicing martial arts and fighting, as you know, coach. Fighting sometimes, whether it's MMA or boxing or kickboxing or Muay Thai, sometimes martial arts, even for fighters, goes out the window. And sometimes you just got to fight someone, and that requires a different mindset, a different amount of heart even, and it's dangerous. What made you, it's more brutal, what made you want to go into full contact fighting, kickboxing, and how did your family feel about that, or your parents?
That's a good question. I had been competing on the sport karate circuit at this point. Like, I'd now been a black belt for a while, and I was successful in sport karate. I was on this team called Team Kanai. It was Carl Kanai. Remember back from the 90s, yeah, Carl Kanai, right? Carl Kanai had a sponsor karate team, and the team was dynamite, and we had like some of the best athletes in the world on that team. So I was getting really good from being exposed to all these different athletes. And I was at Strikeforce in San Jose, and I was watching it, and I was watching those guys. And I was going, man, I could beat those guys, right? So I tried to get one fight. I was like, oh, I just want one. I'll just do one, just so I could say I did it, and that was it. So my coach had called Scott Coker, who's, he's CEO of Bellator, but at the time was the head of Strikeforce and K1 USA. And my coach was like, hey, I got this kid, put him on the next Strikeforce show. And Scott was like, yeah, we're not taking any debuters for this one. It was like an ESPN televised show, right? And coach was like, no, I can fight a little bit, right? Like, you can put him in against anyone, and if he loses, he loses, and you don't have to worry about it ever again. So he put me in with this guy, and the guy wasn't very good, but he was big. Big, he was giant. And I didn't really know what my weight class was going to be for kickboxing yet. So I was just kind of fighting at my natural weight. I can remember the night of the fight, I got there, I showed up to the arena. It was the very first fight, and my name wasn't on the list, right? The name was on the list. They're like, sorry, you're not on the list, you're not in. I'm like, no, I'm fighting. I'm the very first fight. Like, you got to let me in. They're like, so it took them a while. So by the time we got in, I was like, and with televised shows, it's like, it's starting on time, whether you're ready or not, you're starting, right? So I'm like trying to get my hands wrapped. I'm like doing jumping jacks as I'm like walking out to the ring, just trying to warm up a little bit. I was fortunate and knocked the guy out in first round. And after that, it was like, oh, I like this. This is exciting. I mean, it was so exciting, right? Like, just that thrill of, the danger of being in the ring with another guy that's trying to take your head off.
It's like
being able to, and what it was too, it was like, at that point had won like world championships for sport karate like four times. I'd walk down the street and no one even knew I was a fighter, right? Because there was no publicity or anything for it. Now kickboxing, now all of a sudden it's on TV. They're writing stuff, and walking down the street, and people are like, "Hey, I went to your fight, bro." It like made me feel good. So it helped kind of motivate me to want to do it some more. So so I had that first fight, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll have 5 fights. I'll do 5 fights, and maybe I'll win one of those state belts. Like I could have a little belt, feel thing. And I had after my 5th fight, I was like, I think I could do this. Like maybe I can do this, and starting to pick it up. Did that answer your question? I don't know. It's kind of a long roundabout answer, but I think part of it was like, it was really I'm super competitive. not only with myself, I mean, with other people, but with myself. And I felt like this was like kind of fighting at its highest level. And you know, and I wanted to be able to compete with the best guys. So that's kind of why I went into that, you know?
Yeah, you well definitely became a household name in Strikeforce and kickboxing. Even back in the days, I remember just hearing Brian Schwartz, Brian Schwartz. I mean, and you had a humongous following. How did you develop such a big following? I mean, you sold, I think, a big portion of the tickets for those kickboxing bouts. I mean, you're the main event. You were kind of like I think it was like Frank Shamrock and Josh the Punk Thompson after you in terms of popularity over in the peninsula and that way. How did you get so many people to come watch you? Besides the obvious, man, you had a dynamic throwback, Bill Superfoot Wallace, future as Israel Adesanya athleticism and kicking style. I was watching some of your fights before we started this, and it was amazing, man. You're operating at a higher level, first of all, than a lot of your competition, and you were just creative, seeing things. And how'd you get so popular? Like, you got so many people to come watch you, I remember.
Yeah, you know, I think you know, for me, it was always, you know, it was about kind of about the, not only my own personal experience, but it was about the experience for everyone that was coming to watch. And, you know, a big part of being a martial artist is, you know, is showing some humility, which sometimes is hard to translate over into full contact fighting, right? But is, you know, is to have that kind of sense of humility. So I was always like super gracious of people that would, you know, spend their hard-earned money to buy a ticket for the fight. And so I felt like I always tried to make it an experience for the people that were coming to see me. So I would sell tickets because I wanted everyone to sit together. It was like I had like little seating charts, so that I kind of knew where everyone was going to be, because ultimately, if they were having fun, then they're going to want to come back to the fights, you know. And if they want to come back to the fights, then Scott and the promoters are going to throw fights. Like I understood that there was, you know, there needed to be a relationship between the promoter and the fighter, right? And then the fighter and the people, right? Sometimes fighters can be like, I, you know, deserve all the money, and forget the promoter, or forget, you know, this, or the promoters, you know, screwing the fighter. We had a good relationship, understanding like we needed each other, like to be successful. And I knew that it was, in order for us to be successful, we needed the people to be having a good time. So we always had a party afterwards, made everyone feel like they were a part of that, of that success. And it seemed like that helped when fights come around, for people coming to support me. So that, yeah, it's kind of like with selling tickets and stuff. And honestly, I kind of enjoyed it too. Like I would, you know, like it'd be stressful, right? Like with, you know, fights coming up, people, you know, you thinking about another guy's trying to render you unconscious, like, you know, and knowing that fighters sometimes enter the ring and don't come out, like that can put some worry on you know, on an athlete. So the selling tickets helped distract me. I'd be peddling tickets up until like, I'd be on the scale, like taking calls and like, all right, I got 2 more. Like I'd be trying to hustle them just to the very end. But it just kept me from, yeah, just from worrying about the fights. It just kept me busy while I was, you know, when I wasn't training.
Okay, good. Okay, that makes sense now. Yeah, massively, as you know, massively popular at that time. It was unreal. It was very cool to watch.
Thank you.
You put Foster City and your hometown on the map. I remember. I want to ask, what do you think, if you had to say, what's one or something that made you believe, looking back, so dominant at that era of full contact kickboxing, all your fights in Strikeforce and K1? Question one, what do you think made you so dominant or have an advantage over the other guys? Secondly, how important do you believe is boxing to any kind of combat, to train in for any combat sports, whether it be Muay Thai, kickboxing, MMA? How important was your boxing training in your career? And yeah.
That's a good question. A few things. That one, I felt like sport karate athletes in general were like the most underrated athletes out there. These guys are unbelievable. Some of these kids can do, like with the athleticism and being able to, you know, go from punch to kick or kick to punch was like nothing that's out there. So my eyes doing it for so long, being adjusted to some crazy stuff. Like, I mean, we see Raymond Daniels fight, right? Like, right. So Raymond Daniels, you know, with all that thing, but there's a bunch of, I mean, he's exceptional, right? But there's a bunch of guys like
Michael Venom Page, Stephen
yes,
Wonderful Thompson,
yes,
all those guys are super dominant.
yes, right. And it's because, you know, they've been exposed to high level athletes, even though maybe the world doesn't even know it. So they've been training with those guys for so long. So I think that was one thing, you know, and I felt like, you know, martial arts, right? Like we were talking about earlier about, I was saying how my instructor would implement different styles, you know, to make this, you know, kind of hybrid martial art. I kind of did the same thing, right? So like I always wanted to be like, when I was kicking, I wanted to look like a martial artist when I was kicking. But when I was boxing, I didn't want to look like a karate guy trying to box, or, you know, a kickboxer trying to, I wanted to look like a boxer. So we spent, when I decided that I was going to do it, we spent like, if we were training 6 days a week, 5 of the days were all boxing, no kicks. You know, we only kick like maybe like 1 day a week. We've been doing it for the kicks for so long. It was like second nature. But I spent so much time trying to really understand boxing and all the intricacies of it, so that when I wanted to apply it to my style, it would be effective. And I felt like that was working. And I also kind of knew, like after watching kickboxing, that the best kickboxers could box. You know, they had good hands, right? The best ones, right? So I knew that if anyone was going to beat me, they're going to try to want to get in within my legs and try to throw hands. So I needed to be comfortable with that, and not only comfortable, but be able to be good at it, right? I mean, my game was long. I'm 6'3", right? I fought at 168 pounds. Like, so my game was a long game, but I knew that if anyone was going to beat me, they're going to have to bring the fight inside. And I wanted to be like, oh yeah, I can compete at the highest level on any part of the game, whether it be outside, inside, or in between.
Your boxing technique is, if anyone watches your videos on YouTube and your fights, your boxing technique in the kickboxing fights is so clean and sharp. What was your boxing training like? And a fun little side fact, I might have mentioned this before, but I was lucky enough to spar you once at Third Street Gym, and I was just trying to hope I was a mix of excitement. I couldn't believe I was sparring you, honestly. Respect.
Really?
Yeah, I couldn't believe I was sparring you, and to say I was sparring you and Shane, the Irish boxer from Third Street Gym at the time.
Yeah. Yes.
And I couldn't believe I was sparring you, and I just couldn't believe it. And then I was just trying to survive, of course. And you had that southpaw stance is so tricky. And then after we were done, and I was done sparring you and Shane sparred. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it was a long time ago, but I watched you spar Andre Ward, and SOG. I watched you throw down with him. I never seen such cool sparring, I think, since then. That was dope. So talk about, yeah, absolutely, sir. Talk about what would your boxing training consist of? Because your technique was so good.
You know, it's funny because like in martial arts, you know, like, you know, it's one punch, right? One singular punches, right? Not really punching combos, right? So it's throw everything really hard. So the first time I went to the boxing gym to spar, like, yeah, I could spar in the studio for hours, like no problem. Like, you know, punches, kicks all day long, right? Because I got in the boxing ring and now it's closed off, right? And now you're like throwing everything as hard as you can. You know, I got so tired. 3 rounds, like sparred like 3 rounds. I was exhausted, right? So it took me some time to like learn how to like relax, learn how to put punches together, learn head movement, because it was very different than traditional martial arts. You know, learning how to bob and weave and slip punches, and you know, really try to put those hands together. So we spent a lot of time fundamentals and just training just like a boxer would for a fight. Like I said, I only maybe practice like 1 day a week on kicks. Like, not maybe I was shadow boxing, but like like I probably only spar like 1 day a week with kicks just at our martial arts school in Foster City. I mean, just like we did from little kids. And then all the other days I'd go up to Third Street and train at Paul's gym there and just kind of be in that environment to help kind of really, perfect my craft.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. You transitioned, or not transitioned, but after you retired, I believe it was 2006 from kickboxing,
Right.
around that time.
Yes.
You did some mixed martial arts fights. How many mixed martial arts fights did you do? And you had, I think you retired and then will come out of retirement. Why did you fight mixed martial arts, and what did you think of that experience? And why did you retire and then come back and then retire?
So my wife at the time had gotten pregnant. And fighting is a very selfish sport. I mean, it has to be all about the fighter, because there's a chance, like I said, there's always a chance that you could not come out of the ring, right? So I never wanted to like be married and have kids while fighting, because when it's just me, if something happened to me, okay, like whatever, no, world's not any different, right? But now I had people that I needed to support and provide for, so I didn't want to ever risk like the chance of an injury, or or not being able to provide. So when my wife at the time got pregnant, I decided to retire. We opened up the gym, right? We needed a job, and what else was I gonna do, right? So we opened the gym, and just like any like new business owner, right? I was broke, like my money was in the gym, I'm working all the time, got a new baby, new wife, right? So I needed money. Now MMA is starting to come up, and they're offering good money for it, right? So and so I'm watching on TV, right? And and I was 34, right? So it's kind of on the older, like on those, this is time to start wrapping it up, right? But still young enough where I'm watching these guys going, man, there's no way that they're gonna put us in this giant cage. Like, there's no way these guys are gonna catch me, right? Like, it just felt so big compared to a boxing or kickboxing ring. So they were, Coker was calling me, hey, you want to do this? You want to do it? And they're throwing money at me. And finally I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it, right? So it was three round fight against a guy that he wasn't very, very good. I mean, he was just an average fighter,
That Greenfield, is that the guy Greenfield, I think was his name? It was
Lamont Davis.
Okay.
Lamont Davis. He was more of we thought he was gonna be more of a stand-up fighter. He fought in that Chuck Norris karate league, and had a bunch of kickboxing fights. So we thought he was gonna be more of a stand-up fighter. So I didn't practice ground game at all.
Okay.
I watched, listen, this is when I talk about learning the hard way, right? I didn't practice the ground game at all. I was watching it on TV, and I was in shape like I would have been for a 12-round fight. But I was like, okay, well, I practiced enough that if I did get taken down, like how to just kind of wrap them up, and the referee would stand us up, and we'd get back to fighting, right? So we get there. This is at the Sharks Arena at the SAP, right? Big show, and put the little MMA gloves on. I'm like sitting there warming. I'm like, man, if I just hit this dude one time, it's gonna be a wrap, right? Compared to the boxing gloves. So, boom, bell rings, throw a punch, hits him, like overshot it, kind of hit him on top of the head, broke my hand, right? Guy picks me up, boom, dumps me on the ground. I wrap him up, right? I'm looking at the referee. I'm like, okay, like, he doesn't want to stand us up. I'm like, go ahead and do that, right? Well, I felt like I spent the whole fight on my back. So I lost the decision. It was the first time I lost as a professional, and I was bummed. I mean, it was devastated from it, I was like, ah, I'm retiring again. This is it. You know, like this sport is different. Like MMA is so different from kickboxing or boxing. You think that they'd be similar because it's fighting, but it's like a different sport. I mean, it's like baseball and basketball being the only similarity. Only similarity is there's a ball involved, right? But it's not even the same ball. I mean, that's how I felt. Like it was so different. So cast it up. Maybe 3 days later, I'm like, no, forget that. I can't go out like that. I'm not going out like that, right? So I started training again. Still didn't practice any groundwork, but I practiced stuffing takedowns, stop takedown. No, we're gonna fight again. It's not going to the ground. So we a year later, I fought the same guy, same place, broke my hand again, right? Then I got like, this fight was I mean, it was crazy. So I broke my hand. I got dropped in the first round, right?
I watched that one. I watched that one.
I got dropped, right? I'd never been dropped before, right?
Yeah.
Just quick flash, and then he was like, stand up,
Stand up. Yeah.
You get up, right? Like, because I had kind of not talked shit, but a little bit. It was like, man, I was like, bro, he didn't do anything. He just held me down for 3 rounds, right? That's how he won. Like I kind of I mean, gave him his due, but at the same time, it wasn't like, dude, it's not like he put me in the sleeper hold or something, put me out, right?
Ended up being a big mistake for him when he called you back up to your feet, though.
I mean, thank goodness, right? Because I was buzzed a little bit from that shot. It would just, those little gloves, the little gloves, doesn't really take much, right? So I lost that first round. Then second round, I hit him with a round kick, and he's going down, right? He's going down, and instead of just stepping in and hitting with a punch, I threw another kick, pulled it at the very end. It barely touched his glove, but they took a point away from me, right? For it, because he was down.
Getting up. Yeah, he was getting up. Yeah.
Right. So now I'm 2 points down, right? And I haven't watched the fight so long, but he might have taken another point. I think it hit him in the back of the head, like he was turning. He was trying to wrestle me, and I was down. Long as I was down going to third round. I needed a knockout to win. And my corner was just like, there was like no strategy. It was just like Mike Basil, who's like super, Mike, right? He's big time cut man now, right? Like he's going to say is like, you gotta knock him out. You gotta knock him out. That's all he's yelling at me. I'm like, okay.
And had a good point though. He had a good point there though.
No, it was great, right? It was amazing. And so yeah, it was 20 seconds left in the fight, and I hit him with a right hook, knocked him out. Herb Dean stopped it, and then that was it. I was like, all right, that's enough. Let's be done with that chapter and move on. But it was like the most exciting way to end a career, just in general, with facing adversity from the loss, but then facing it in that fight also from I was cut, I had a broken hand. It was just I was kind of a mess for that, but it ended up working out great, and it makes a great story 20 years later.
Did you book another fight after that one, or?
No, I was done. I was like, that's it. That was it. I had troubles with my hands. I broke my hand in K1. In a K1 match, really bad break. It had given me troubles, and I broke it in both MMA fights. I broke the same hand, so it was like, and I was old. I was old at that point, right? So old for fighting. So to start now trying to pick up learn something completely new, just didn't seem like it was the right time. I had my wife at the time she was pregnant with our second daughter, so it was a good time to wrap it up. I kind of dealt with my personal demons by having that rematch, and it was time to focus on building the gym and doing that whole thing.
Yeah, definitely want to get into your transition from fighter to business owner. But before that, you fought in K1, which is awesome. One of the most popular kickboxing fighting leagues of all time. How was that? And any fighters that you ran into, throwback famous fighters at that time that you had maybe a conversation with or trained with or fought? How was it in K1?
K1 was amazing. I mean, it was, at the time, it was new to US. It was huge in Japan, right? They're selling out the Tokyo Dome, and now they're doing K1 USA. And Coker was the head guy for that, right? So, was to be able to fight at the Bellagio and the Mirage, was pretty, it was pretty life-changing for me as far as like experiences. It's like, I remember there was, we were at the fighting at the Bellagio, and I come out to the ring and I'm bouncing around, and I look over the side, and Michael Jordan was sitting in the front row over the right? And then I look over to the left, and Mike Tyson's sitting on the other side, right?
You're like,
and
I better win.
right? And then as Dr. Dre's over on the other side, and I was like, I whispered to my coach, I'm like, oh man, I just saw Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson, and Dr. Dre. And he's like, shut up. He's like, just focus on fighting, right? Like, don't worry about what's going on out there. But I mean, that kind of experience, I can't say that I would ever have an experience to be able to be around these type of like high level celebrities, that were not only there to just to be in the same room with them, but they got to see me fight. And but as far as fighters, Ernesto Hoost, some of the great K1 champions. I shared a dressing room with Bob Sapp, which was, that dude's such a character. But like, there was Rick Rufus, some really good, really great kickboxing legends, that came through that K1 USA, and I was very fortunate to be able to just be a part of that. Was a pretty great experience.
Yeah, not many people can say they did. Did you speak with or have any interactions with any of those legends like Rick Rufus or Ernesto Hoost?
Oh yeah, all of them for sure. Yeah, and all great guys, Rick Rufus was was originally a full contact guy, right? So that in itself was like, to me, was like, oh, I'm gonna, this guy's a legend, right? It's like meeting Bill Wallace, right? So it was cool to see him. And Ernesto Hoost, like, I remember seeing, I was like, oh, I gotta shake the guy's hand like one time, right? Like, but I fought like five times, I think, for K1. It's just a different deal, and they had never had fights at the Bellagio. It was the first fights ever at the Bellagio. It was just a really, really cool experience.
Nice. So now let's go into where you decided after fighting or during fighting that you needed a way to provide for yourself and your family. And you did that by opening up a gym. You went from, I think earlier you were saying that, you put all your money in the gym. There was some struggles in the beginning. How did you go from that to having this beautiful gym, a wonderful brand, and a great business? Like, how did you get from there to where you are now?
It's funny. I kind of, everything happens right for a reason. So I had won Sport Karate World Championships 2 years in a row. And so I was getting ready to start training to go again for the third year, right? And I was being kind of lazy, right? I was, I think how old I was. I was probably like 25, right? I was being kind of lazy. So I was like, I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start this class. And, I'm gonna train with them. It's like kind of train like a fighter, right? I called it pro training. It was 5 days a week. It was at 5:30 in the morning at the Bay Club in Redwood Shores. So I pitched it to them. Like, hey, I want to start this little thing, and they said, okay, we can do 5:30 in the morning. There's no one here during that time. You can do it. So I started this class. 6 people show up, right? Sign up for it. Was 5 weeks. We train together. We'd go running every morning, right? And I knew that if I had to meet someone, I'd show up, right? So we'd go running. We'd hit the bag. It was like, now kickboxing classes, with music and bags and gloves, and we were using like handheld bags, no music, like just training like kind of like traditional martial arts style, but for this tournament. So 5 weeks end, and I'm off to my tournament, right? And these 6 guys were like, all right, so when we can do it again? And I was like, again? I'm like, this was just a one-time thing, right? We're not doing it again. And they're like, no, we got to do it again. So I did it again, and now 6 people went from 12, and then 12 to 20. Pretty soon, I started running these little camps. I was getting like 70 people showing up at 5:30 in the morning to do these trainings. So like when you run down the street, there'd just be like a sea of people running down, down the little neighborhoods in Redwood Shores. And it kind of became this, it just became this like little thing that was going on out there. So I kind of kept that going throughout. Even then, when I switched into kickboxing, from karate to kickboxing, I kept it going. So I'd always have like teach a class, train, maybe teach another class, then go back and train some more. That was like my job, right? And these 2 classes that I would teach a day, and then I would train for my fight. So when I retired, I had a pretty big network. It made sense to start a gym. I had like a foundation of members. So we opened up. We had probably a couple hundred members to start with. So the gym started off with a little buzz, and we were able to survive. And we've been through obviously the pandemic, right? But we also went through a couple of stock market crashes. We've endured a lot of stuff through the years. So I feel very fortunate to be still alive and kicking. Brian, but that's kind of how we got it going, right? Like I remember at the time I had my best friend. I was like, dude, I'd always like come up with like little business things. I'd be like, we should do this as a business. Or I like kind of, I'm entrepreneurial, right? So I was thinking about like a little hustle, right? And he'd be like, no, it's a terrible, he's super successful, right? He'd be like, no, it's a terrible idea. I'd be like, oh, how about this? And he'd be like, no, that's terrible. And so I came to him, I'm like, hey, what if we open a gym and do these classes like for everyone, right? And he's like, you know what? Now you got a good idea. We can work with that. And that's how Undisputed kind of came together. So at the time, I got 20 of my students to do like lifetime membership. So they each paid $5,000 for to be lifetime members. And then I took 5 investors that invested $15,000 each, right? So $175,000 total. And back then that was kind of a lot of money, right? And I designed this gym on a cocktail napkin in a bar, right? And we built it out. We built out this gym, and it was, back then there was no boutique fitness other than maybe some yoga studios. There was no Soul Cycle or Berries or any of these other things. It was like really we weren't the first bag classes, but we were one of the first ones out there, that were doing these like type of training classes.
That's a great story. I'm not going to keep you too much longer, just a few more minutes, but I really appreciate your time. Also,
I appreciate you.
Thank you. I want to ask so you built the gym, you got the investors, you got the gym members, the loyalty from your students, helped you get you started, kickstart the gym, you built it out, beautiful gym. And then now what I wanted to ask, what's the key to, okay, how about this? What is the secret or some of the keys to being a good trainer in the business that you're in? And being a good person too? Like, what are some of your secrets? Because you have to have those to get to where you are today.
Yeah, I think, to be successful in this business, right, you have to love what you do. You got to love it. If you don't love it, it's going to come out that it's just a job. I feel like for all the ups and downs of being in business and through the years, I always loved teaching people, right? Seeing people be successful, seeing people like reach goals, seeing people do things that they didn't think they could ever do, and then be able to do that. It felt very close to me with my background, having not being able to do that. Someone did it for me, right? As my martial arts teacher, I always felt like it was as much of a business, it was just kind of a way to give back. And I feel like people feel that you're being genuine when you're doing that. And I think that's like been like kind of the key, like through all the years. And we never have had like the best marketing or the best, or best PR or this and that, but like people that come in, I feel like we try to give our all to every single person, and it is paid back by building a loyal following. And I think that's like the key. And I think as far as being a good person, I mean, I think we all try to be our best. I definitely it's something I definitely think about, I mean, and have had stumbles along the way, like, but I feel like I'm always trying to be my best, and give my best to everything. And the idea is that it's going to all kind of work out here in the end,
Yes.
I mean, at least that's what I think right now.
That's good. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Now, a couple more questions. I know you have a family. Do your kids study martial arts? And if not martial arts, do they do any sports?
I have 3 kids. None of them do martial arts, which they've all done a little bit. Like I've shown them and they've taken some of it, but none of them have really like jumped in and been like, this is my thing. My oldest daughter is a really good little soccer player.
Nice.
Yeah, so she plays soccer. My middle it plays volleyball, and then my little guy, I have a 10-year-old son. He loves football. So that's kind of their thing. So I bring it, they come to the gym and maybe they'll take class, or I'll show them some stuff. I mean, I want my girls to always be able to protect themselves and feel confident, right? And then my son, I just don't want him to grow up and be a sissy, whether he can fight or not. Hopefully he never has to find out, but I always want him to feel confident that he could if it went down. And I didn't want to push it on him because it's dangerous, and I feel pretty lucky that I can like make complete sentences and be able to do things like this and have conversations where I don't necessarily want my kids doing it. If they wanted to, is one thing, but I'm not pushing them on it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything you just said with my own kids. And I have a very similar situation. They've all done it, and I've trained them a lot when they were smaller, but now they've branched out to their own sports. But I won't push it on them, especially the competition part, unless they had the hunger for it. That's a different story. So, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Like, you never know. I mean, they've grown up in the gym, right? So it's like they know it. Like, I mean, they'll come into classes and I'm like, God, they would probably be pretty good, right? Like,
right? I get that too. Totally.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, they're way more athletic than I was. My ex-wife is a pretty good athlete. So like they, luckily that, they get their athleticism from her side, but I always kind of hope that they maybe have a little bit of my grit and determination, and if we can get the both, and they'll be successful in whatever they do.
Definitely. Yeah. So I talk about my kids sometimes, my sons at even at Baker Street Boxing, and some people. Yeah. So they're my sons, they're 19 and 13. And then I have a daughter, daughter 17. Yeah.
Okay.
Wild, man. It's wild. And but I've made them all train. They've done all the martial arts. I mean, from Muay Thai, boxing to karate to judo to Kempo. But when they're in the gym with me, some of the students there, they say, "Wow, your boys are really good. They're so fluid." And my immediate reaction, "Nah, they're not that good. They're not that good, man." I really feel that, but I guess that's just why dad shouldn't train their kids. I don't know. We just don't give them their props.
Well, I mean, honestly, it's like, I feel like guys that have competed in high levels. Like, I mean, I know I was always like that with even myself. Like, people be like, "That was a great fight." But this could have been better. I could have been, "Oh, you see that? Oh, look how nasty that is. That's terrible." Like, I've never been like where I looked at something and going, "That's something I'm really like proud of," because it's always like, like you don't ever want to, if for fighters, if you're content, right? If you're content with where you're at, it sets you up for losing, right? So it's always kind of striving to be better and better and better. And no matter how great it is, there's always, things to correct. And so it's a great, and then it's also like it's a kind of a demon too, right? Because you can never like look back and be like, oh, that was actually a pretty good little career you had, right? I'm getting better at it now because it's so far removed, but for a long time it was like, that could have been better. Yeah.
100%. Two more quick questions. Favorite, and then we'll close out. Two more quick questions, please. Favorite martial arts movie, and could be an old one, a new one. Top of
favorite martial arts movie. Enter the Dragon for sure, right? That was Enter the Dragon, but Return of the Dragon is what got me into martial arts. When Bruce Lee fights Chuck Norris, that was the one that got me in. But Enter the Dragon was, Bruce Lee was great. But then I used to love as a kid. I haven't watched it in years. I'll see if it holds up. Did you ever see that movie, The Five Deadly Venoms?
No, but I know it. I know it's a famous throwback.
Yeah, it's old school kung fu, right? I haven't seen it in a long time. But as a kid, that used to be my like. Oh, I used to love that movie. But I would say if you had to pull one, I'd say, Enter the Dragon is, best. And Bruce Lee was at his best at that point,
Really quick too, I can never forget this week, the week since this has been coming up, this interview. I've been thinking about it for two reasons. One, I was super excited to interview you because of your martial arts background. And number two, this Friday drops the new season of Cobra Kai on Netflix, which me and my son love to watch. So I was like, oh man, the same week I get to interview Brian and the new season of Cobra Kai comes out. I'm like, winning. This is a really cool martial arts week for me. Last one, can I ask, favorite fighter? Could be any combat sport. One of your favorite fighters that you just looked up to, or you just like their technique. Favorite fighter?
Good. That's another great question. Muhammad Ali as a kid was like, he was already done when I was coming up. I used to watch a lot of him, like trying to learn from him. But there's so many great fighters through history. I did love Marvin Hagler, being a southpaw. I loved watching him, his ability to be able to box and punch. I felt I did really like Sugar Ray Leonard, and not so much for like the flashy stuff that he might be known for, but man, that guy was a great body puncher, right? If you watch him, like, and a great finisher. So I really enjoyed him. And I used to really like Felix Trinidad a lot, who I feel gets forgotten.
All the greats.
Yeah, so those are like probably my faves. Off the top, I think those.
Who do you like in the UFC? Sorry, Brian. Who do you like in the UFC right now?
I like him. I always like George St. Pierre because of the martial arts background. Anderson Silva, I really like too. Same type of thing. Like, just because they, it wasn't, you could see the different styles. Like when they were standing up, you saw the martial arts. When they were on the ground, you could see they weren't like kickboxers trying to wrestle and do groundwork. They look like, when they're on the ground, they look like jiu-jitsu experts. And when they were standing, they looked like high-level kickboxers. Like that kind of style, like really, like I could really appreciate, because that's how I felt like I was what I would try to do for kickboxing, was to try to have that balance. Like whatever discipline I was doing at the time, I wanted to look the best of what I was doing.
And speaking of Anderson Silva, I heard he just recently signed to fight Jake Paul in a boxing match. Any predictions on that?
I think he's gonna win. I think
That's what I said.
I think he's gonna win. I think I went to Jake Paul's last fight against Tyron Woodley, which was, I gotta say, like, the whole event was unbelievable. Like, it was in Tampa. There was 20,000 people there. It was packed, right? Like, and so different than like a high level boxing match. Like you go to like a big championship fight, you know, ringside, you get like kind of like older dudes with like maybe like a younger woman, right? Like, you know, you get like that kind of like
Vegas.
Yeah, right. But this, you know, or you see some layers, but this, it was like all these kids with like hair that they flipped to the side and like little skinny pants, right? I was sitting next to some kid, and people are coming and be like, oh, like, hey, so and so, right? I was like, oh, he's like a YouTuber or something, right? I didn't even know who these guys were, but like the event itself was pretty spectacular. One of my good friends was fighting on the undercard, so I went to go out and support him, and but it was a pretty cool experience. But I think Anderson's gonna get him. I think so.
Thank you for your prediction.
And I think he's gonna knock him out too.
I would have to agree on that one. I'd have to agree on that one.
Yeah.
Actually, I've been doing, a lot of my friends too, MMA guys, jiu-jitsu guys, boxers, they're saying similar thing. That's the chatter and right now and we're DMing each other and stuff. It's pretty big news.
Yeah.
That's a consensus. Yeah. Was I ask you, how do people get a hold of you if they want to follow you on Instagram? Follow Undisputed Boxing Gym. How do people follow you, sir?
Yeah, my personal Instagram is Brian Schwartz 7XWC, 7-time world champion, right? And then my the Undisputed Boxing Gym is Team UBG, UBG, like Undisputed Boxing Gym. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate you taking the time. And
absolutely. And I gotta ask
war stories.
Every guest I ask at the end, and the last thing, what are your words of wisdom?
My words of wisdom? Oh man, I feel like, I mean, there could be so many things, but I think just the general, at least from where I'm coming from, there is like, there's really truly nothing that you can't accomplish, right? As long as you stay disciplined and dedicated. No one can ever say that you can't do something. It's always going to be within yourself to make that happen. And it doesn't always happen, you know, overnight, but if you stay consistent and dedicated and passionate about what you're doing, you can really achieve anything. And that's, I feel like that's how my life has kind of worked out for me.
Well, it's working out for you really good. Congratulations on the successful gym, Undisputed Boxing Gym. Everyone follow Brian Schwartz, 7-time world champion kickboxing. And thanks for doing this today. I appreciate your time, sir.
No, I appreciate you. Thank you. I gotta come up there and work out with you guys.
Yes, please. Yes, we would love that.
I gotta get a little better shape so I don't look so tired.
Yeah, all of us need to. And I'll tell John that you said hello. I'm gonna see him later today.
I will. You do so, please. I'll send you some pictures. I got some pictures of him as a little kid. Doing martial arts together, because he was a little kid when I was 15. Back when he was like 6. You know, like a little kid running around the karate school. I'll send you. I got some pictures of him. Yeah, we can embarrass him. You gotta send that. Before he was JV, he was just Jonathan Valente, right?
That's awesome.